Broadcasting live in Tempe, Arizona, you are tuning in to the Culture Crush Business Podcast with Kendra Maples. We are here to highlight great companies and great resources for improving company culture.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Culture Crush Business Podcast. On this podcast, we focus on everything surrounding businesses with a good company culture. We deep dive with resource partners on how to improve company culture. And we really are your hub of all of these resources in one place. And then on the podcast, we get to have the conversations about them. So today, before we get started and introduce our guests, I do want to thank our sponsor. Our sponsor, Gateway Bank, is a community bank in Arizona that specializes in serving small businesses across the valley and the country. We are so thankful to have them as a sponsor. When you work with Gateway Bank, you don't have to call a 1-800 number for support or submit your loan application and wait for weeks or months for an answer. You get fast, personal service from a team who knows you and cares about you. Whether you need a loan or banking services for your business, Gateway is there to help. Visit gcbaz.com/Culture Crush for details and a free consultation with Bank President James Christensen, who happens to be with us today too. James, hello.
It's great to see you today, Kendra.
I love, and you and I have talked about this before. We've talked about how people used to say like, oh, it's not personal, it's just business. And business is personal and building relationships. And I love that not only I've had the support of Gateway Bank tying in and supporting Culture Crush as a podcast and Culture Crush as, you know, a movement for improving companies, but then having you and being able to bring you into these conversations as another expert in that space. I mean, you are truly leading a business that has such a good culture. And I love that you get to be here again today.
I love to come here because it's the only place I get called an expert.
You are, sir. And you're the fashion one of the group. I always tend to have no patterns, solid. And now you have your spicy lemon shirt on today. I love it. Is it lemons and umbrellas?
I do.
I
It's
love it.
William Murray.
Oh.
So Bill Murray. So these are very serious. and yes, I think that is a doobie on there. So,
I'm just going to jump in because I feel like I'm allowed to as a producer.
Yes.
At some point when James is here, we need to have his shoes on top of the table because he's also has trademark shoes too. So just put a plug in for that.
That always match the shirts. And I love, Karen, I love that you jumped in. You always can. This truly is the best tie-in to start and talk about culture, especially with you being the bank president. You have cracked this shell and this image that people think of when they think of a bank president in a suit. And I mean, I probably fit that mold in my attire today more than you. So I love that you jumped in. And I love that you pointed out that there's golf tees and maybe a doobie on your shirt. Okay. We're going in so many directions already. Okay. Now what I want, and James, is there anything that you want to say as we get started? And then we'll introduce our lovely guest today.
I think we should introduce our lovely guest before we go completely off course.
I love it. Today we have Brenda Mariah, outplacement and career transition coach with Push Career Management. I'm so excited to have her today. And I think we'll just jump in and have her tell us a little bit about herself.
That'd be great, Brenda. If you could just introduce yourself, tell us about you and your company.
Well, I don't think that's fair because we started this whole conversation talking about lemons and umbrellas and banks and all sorts of other things. And now I'm supposed to just talk about my boring old little self. I don't know that that's fair, but I'll try.
I don't think there's anything boring about it.
All right. So. And I will, for the record, state that I am wearing some different colored shoes that are fashion heavy. So
let's see the shoes.
Let's just
James, show us your shoes. Let's look at shoes today.
We're already mustard colored shoes. And shout out to my favorite stylist, Melissa Davis. Best shoe ever. Okay. So my name is Brenda Mariah. Some may know me as Brenda Cunningham, but my new identity is Brenda Mariah. And I believe we all have an opportunity to reset and reestablish our identities. Sometimes I think that our identities are tied to our job titles. And so what happens when your job goes away and it wasn't your choice? And that is the thing that I had to learn, unfortunately, the hard way many years ago. My whole sense of self was shaken to its core. My sense of self-esteem, self-worth, all the confidence that I used to carry somehow just vanished when I was laid off. And I didn't expect it or see it coming. I was doing such a good job and so many pats on the back and so much, you're just awesome and you're really coming in and ruffling all the feathers and doing such a wonderful thing. And yet I was laid off and found myself really stuck on the couch, stuck in depression and going through all the feelings that I now can relate to as an outplacement coach, because so many other people feel those same emotions that I felt: the uncertainty, the fear, the doubt, the just complete devastation to their self-esteem. And the uncertainty around, how am I going to make it? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to, keep my children in their social clubs or different events, right? How am I going to, where's the next meal coming from sometimes? And then how do I get my mind right? All of those things drove me to do the work that I do. When I was laid off, I received outplacement support and it was helpful. I'll give credit where credit is due. And since then, as I've transitioned from my own career in engineering and project management to doing this work of career transition support, I was invited at one point to actually serve one of these outplacement firms. And I realized that sometimes there were just kind of butts in seats. Sometimes there were people who didn't know any more about a resume than the people that they were helping. And so I said to myself, we've got to do better. We've got to offer a better solution. And so Push Career Management wasn't born as an outplacement company, but it evolved into one because there was a need.
And now that you are in this space and you're filling this need, which is absolutely, you identified it. What do you love, like, as you're working with companies and as you're working with individuals to have that step process? What do you like? What's the part that you love the most about
I love when that light bulb comes on for them.
it?
They can see for themselves, wait a minute, I am awesome. I don't have a need to be curled up in a ball on my couch. I am amazing. And I have so many wonderful things that I can contribute, but I kind of forgot that along the way. My whole worth, my whole sense of self was tied to my job title. So when that changed, somehow my identity was gone, as opposed to recognizing I'm still amazing. I've always been amazing. I always will be amazing. And that job title was temporary at best. And so a lot of times it's the promises that we were made that don't hold true anymore, right? We were brought up, well, many of us, depending on your age, we were brought up in a time where if you go to college and you get a good job and you work for 30 years and you get your watch and you can retire and you can feed your family, you can go on vacation. And that dream, that whole system just got pulled out from up underneath us, where all of a sudden, what do you mean I can't keep my job, but I want to keep my job? The job itself had to go away. So where does that leave you, right? And so when I get to work with somebody and say, well, sounds like you did this. Sounds like you did that. Sounds like you really moved the team forward. Sounds like you really crushed those revenue goals. Sounds like you really did some amazing things over there. And they say, wow, I didn't even think about it like that. I just was a salesperson. I just worked in marketing. I just performed customer service, and they forgot how much they contributed. And so it's the encouragement for me when I see it happening. I see the shift in their faces. I can see it. I can feel it, whether we're on Zoom, on a telephone call, it doesn't matter. It's obvious, it's tangible that they are different because now they know that they're amazing.
I want us to remember that piece that you said about encouragement, because that's going to come up in a little bit as we talk about kind of these two different sides of the work that you do with companies. Can you tell James and I a little bit more about like what that looks like when you go in? Because you're going in some cases, you're going in with a company to help them and help their team prepare for if those moments happen, which that right there is like the epitome of a good company culture. If you can understand and realize that, yes, you want your people to be there and you want them to stay there, you want them to be there forever. The reality is, life happens, the world happens, budgets happen, and at some point you may have to make these cuts and lay people off. And how does that look and what does that look like? But having somebody like you come in and support that entire process really takes care of the people and allows you to understand that the world is going to do worldly things sometimes.
Amen. And you said it really takes care of the people.
Yeah.
Right. Something that was mentioned earlier, and I love this in reference to Gateway Community Bank, was, it's not business. It's just, it's not personal. It's just business.
Mhm.
Well, it is personal. These people have contributed 60% of their waking lives to your business.
Mhm.
They are not to be so easily discarded if the world systems of supply chain or what have you start to disrupt your operation and your revenues. We don't just throw those people away who have contributed so much incredible value. They have helped you probably break records in revenues and customer retention and all of these kinds of things. And
Mhm.
so now the hard times come. It's like you think about being in a marriage. Think about being in a marriage. Do you walk away when it gets hard? Or do you find a way to figure it out? And if you walk away, what does that say about you when things simply got a little hard? Now,
Mhm.
it is a little different, of course, because business does not require lifelong commitment, but it does require decency. And we have to remember that these are human beings we're talking about. This is why I was so drawn. Gravity just kind of drew me into Kendra and the Culture Crush podcast and the whole system that you're trying to build here. I was so drawn to it because I'm like, I think there is such an emphasis on healthy workplace culture and healthy onboarding systems and all of these beautiful
Mhm.
things. But what about when people have to leave? What about that? Who takes care of them? And we don't always know how to do that
Mhm.
because you can't always relate to those individuals in that situation. And so, yes, it is emotionally a little bit draining for somebody like me to come in and be able to offer guidance and support. And so one of the first things that I do is check in with people's hearts. How are you?
Mhm.
How are you feeling? How are you doing with all of this? How are you handling all of this? Are you okay? Do you need to just kind of scream, vent, shout, let it out? Like get it off of your chest because this is hard.
Mhm.
And just acknowledging how difficult and challenging a moment this can be for a professional. I don't care if you're a seasoned professional who's been through a couple of layoffs or if this is your first layoff and you never saw it coming, it hurts.
Mhm.
It hurts all the same. And so coming in with a high degree of empathy can just make all the difference in the world. And then shifting into gratitude, are there any things that we can still be grateful for? Any good things? And one thing that I like to emphasize whenever a company takes care of their people and brings in an outplacement firm, whether it's Push Career Management or not, is to just say most companies don't do this for their people.
Mhm.
They
Oh.
don't, unfortunately, they don't all do this for their people when they're forced with this kind of change. And so I'm always grateful to come in and support those companies who actually care, who actually want to provide a softer landing for their folks. So yeah, this is necessary. People are in emotional battle. This is one of the just rawest, most just excruciating times in their lives, and it is very much like a breakup. And so I think about a phrase that I'll say a lot is, change will come, and it'll come by force or by choice. And sometimes when you didn't choose it, you have to kind of reset, because it can be something of a trauma. Now, I'm not a licensed therapist or psychologist or anything like that, but it can feel very traumatic. And if you do not have a skilled navigator, you can flounder and cost yourself a lot of time.
Mhm. And when you are coming in and working with companies and with their team, is it when they know that layoffs are coming, or do you ever go in and work with companies and teams if maybe this is just to prepare them as individuals and there's no plan for layoffs? Like, do they know? Do they not know? Like,
So I'll tell folks all the time, even some of like my marketing is like, I hope we never have to work together. I hope you never have to meet me. I hope never, ever, ever do you ever have to meet me. But we know that that is simply not the case. We've seen just record layoffs in tech sector this year alone. The best course is, of course, to be proactive. Give people as much heads up as possible, because if they know that something is coming down the pipeline, see, a lot of businesses fear, if I tell my people, they'll mentally check out, they'll stop performing, and see what happens right there. That's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about the company. And we're forgetting that it's not personal, it's just business, but it is personal. And it is about the people. And so we have to remember that there are people, human lives affected by these decisions that we're making. So instead of kind of hoarding that information and saying, you know what, I don't want to tell them because I don't want them to check out. No, I'm going to share with them that this is coming so that they have an opportunity to find something new. And I want to do right by them, as opposed to like squeezing every little drop that I possibly can out of them before the ship is officially sunk. We don't want it to get to that place. So soon as you have an inkling of knowing, there are some very proactive outplacement transition strategies that could be put in place where you can help them with things like writing recommendations, right? With things like helping them, with resume updates and job identification coaching, interview coaching, all the pieces, of course, that can help them accelerate the transition. But those are things we can't fear. If I offer them that, they're just going to leave. Well, yeah, they're going to leave, but you're putting them in a better position to not have this gap between when you officially laid them off and when they were able to find something else, because you didn't give them any tool, any resources, any help of any kind, and you left it down to the last minute. And so, not to mention WARN Act, certain employers that have certain number of employees have requirements to notify. But not to mention those, let's even just think about smaller companies. Is it just the right thing to do? It absolutely is. It's just the right thing to do. But here's another thought. Sometimes we're so worried about letting people know in advance. We give them the notice, and now they're floundering. It takes them months and months, sometimes a year, to find another position. And then you're going to hold those same employees to account when they interview with you a year from now. And you're going to say, why do you have a year gap on your resume? It's because you put them in that position. So lest we not forget that you have a part to play in this, employers.
And James, I just keep going and going. I know you have questions too. The only thing I want to say is you said something about like, yeah, but what if they leave or when they leave? And there was a quote, I have no idea who said it, but it- they talk about investing into your people and investing into the company and the individuals. And somebody says, oh, well, what if they leave? And then they rebuttal with, yeah, but what if they stay? Like, so then if maybe layoffs don't happen or something like that, you've invested in these people and these resources and the pieces to keep them, which is another piece that, is a huge part of the culture of all of this. James, I know you have questions.
I have lots
or
of
something.
questions. What was coming to mind was, when you definitely talk about everything's personal, but just that you're still human. And I was also thinking for your business with with Push Career Management is there's a lot of times where I could see you helping a company that was just looking to raise leaders. And I look at how many times I've had to push people into that. And it's more of like what you said earlier was you can do this and this and this. And you really are amazing. And they're like, oh, wow, maybe I am. And I think a lot of people I think, hey, I just wasn't cut out for leadership or management. And I think what you see in your role or what I see in my role is I think we can see some things sometimes other people can't. And it really lifts them up and moves them in to those positions. Most companies are small and a lot of them don't do the layoffs very well when times are tough, and things do happen. But I also think, if that process is handled really well, I help people move on to other positions sometimes if it's a better opportunity. Believe it or not, a quarter of my team has come back that I have right now. And it's like, hey, we tried it. Culture matters, and it does. And I think just that personal investment. But I also think when you have cultures that are interested in folks' career, they're interested in humans, they also can make it through some things that most companies can't. And I think when your team knows that, instead of keeping it hidden, like, hey, we're struggling, for you to come in on the early part of that and work with the team, and I think is amazing, because most when they do layoffs, it's like, hey, here's your 2 weeks. Okay, I'm going to be really generous. You get paid for a month. And it's like, wait, I've been here for 20 years. What the heck? And it's you're justifying that decision in your mind. But so what do you, once you start building people up, what do you physically and mentally see change in them?
I love it. Now that's really the other arm of Push Career Management is career management. So these are folks who are killing it in their jobs. They're doing extremely well. But they don't know how to advance to that next place. To your point, there are folks who are perhaps underperforming because they don't know what success actually looks like within their organization. So organizations sometimes are going under, and it's unnecessary. I'll tell you that so many of the folks that I work with, they are amazing people. By the time I'm done with them, they walk around with their chest all big. But when I ask them, how do you know you're doing a good job at work? Their answer is, I don't. Or only if my boss isn't yelling at me, or if I'm not getting a bunch of complaints, that's how I know I'm doing a good job. And I'm like, that's not good enough. Where are the metrics that were driving your performance, and why don't you know them? And this is a big issue. We have got to do better, employers, letting people understand these people that you value, you've invested in them, you've hired them, you've trained them, you've onboarded them, you've done all of these things, and yet you don't give them the keys, the markers that indicate, here's how you'll know you're doing a good job. And it is a very reversible thing that we can control. We can do something about that. Absolutely. Would it be more beneficial to bring someone like me in to help just reset and establish some metrics or some KPIs and say, okay, here's how we can help you increase to the production or revenue or whatever throughput goals you're trying to achieve, versus we didn't even bother to try. And now our business has gone under and we have to lay off, 50 folks. which is better? Of course, you come in and you proactively reverse that whole sinking ship and you turn that thing around and you get it moving in the right direction again. But these are things that, to your point, this is why probably Gateway Community Bank does so well in the area of employee retention, because you actually think about these kinds of things. And I want more employers to really follow your lead, follow your model. This is the ideal, is to not ever have to lay people off and bring in an outplacement firm in the first place. I'd much rather you bring in a leadership development, a performance enhancement kind of organization like Push Career Management, and get those people moving in the right direction, doing the right work at the right time, at the right cadence, pulling in the right numbers, revenues, all the things, as opposed to, sorry, we didn't make it, we got to let everybody go.
And investing that time, that energy, if there's the dollar amount to be able to invest in that, in turn, right? Like you said, James, 25% that have left have come back. That shows the value in what you're doing and how you're supporting your teams. And it doesn't have to be in these situations where they're leaving or whatnot. It's investing in them in those moments. And then, James, you said it, that sometimes you have helped them look for other jobs. That says so much of you as a leader, to be able to recognize, maybe when you're sitting down with someone like Brenda or somebody else and you're doing some leadership development and you see, wow, you've maybe gone as far as you can in the role and in the company here of what we can provide to you. What's next? The fact that you are saying, yeah, I'm helping them find another role somewhere else. You're recognizing them as humans, not just a pawn that's in the workplace to do the job, right?
Some of the things you hear. Just before I came over, one of the emails I got from my team, he's my newest employee, and he was up for his first review, and he didn't bring anything up. We followed through. He got a raise. We chatted with him, and the email I got back from him it wasn't thanks for the money, thanks for this. It was thanks for seeing my value. And it's, you have to be fair on the compensation, but it shouldn't be rare or outstanding that you did what you said you were going to do, but it is. And there's so many people in I mean, it seems like a lot of people just make it into management by tenure.
I was telling my son that very thing. They were considering him for a promotion at his job. And I asked him a very pointed question, right? I don't know many mothers that would challenge their advancing children, but I said, are they looking to promote you because you're a solid leader, or are they looking to promote you because you're good at your job? And there is a very big difference. And there's a meme and it says something to the effect of like, people don't quit bad jobs, they quit bad bosses or something like that. And this is the recurring theme, is when there are poor leaders in leadership positions or in management positions. I can't really, soundly call them leadership positions, but when there are poor leaders in those high-ranking positions, it absolutely has an effect on the subordinates, on the employees on the team, because there's no confidence there. This person doesn't have my back. They don't know how to set those goals, set those right expectations, all of those things. Performance reviews are probably less than optimal from, the experience that you had with your employee. Most people under poor leadership don't even know things like, perhaps I should prepare for my performance appraisal with my boss, and perhaps I should familiarize myself with the kind of budget cycle so that I can ask for raises at the right time. And I'm not told, oh, sorry, you just missed that budget window. It'll have to be next year. We don't want to have those conversations when we absolutely should have access to the best information so that we can make the right choices at the right time. And I think even about just putting the right people in the right places. Now, in my leadership role for the National Resume Writers Association, we have had a couple of folks, even on our board, where it's like your skill set isn't actually best suited for this work. Your skill set would be amazing over there. And so let's really think that through. Let's look at what that could look like. And we see just people thriving in the right roles. And so sometimes it's not about, let me lay everybody off and just kind of clean slate and start this thing all over again. Sometimes it's just playing a really strategic game of chess, moving the pieces around and getting the system in good working order again. And so I love the proactive thought process that I'm hearing from James, and of course the types of culture that Kendra is trying to build and encourage. And I just want to continue to encourage every employer who's listening to the sound of my voice, like, please make sure that you're being proactive and putting qualified leaders in positions of leadership.
I have a question for both of you on kind of that, where we're talking about the employers doing these things and the employers putting the people in the right seats and all of this sort of thing. What can you suggest or share for the employees themselves? Maybe they are at a company that the leaders are not a James Christensen, and they're not trying to help them find the right spot, whether it's at the company or not. What are some of the suggestions and kind of guidance that you can give to some of these employers who maybe, like your son, maybe are young, they're getting into the industry, and how do they form that direction on their own instead of being pulled in these positions that maybe later on they go, oh, wait, I've gone on this whole path because somebody else plugged me in. Maybe it's not really where I wanted to be plugged in. What ideas or suggestions do you guys have for just the employees themselves?
When you mentioned relationship earlier, one of the things that came to mind for our daughters is when we talked about, boyfriends, and you joke about what dad's gonna, he's gonna be hard on the boyfriends, and really it's just very simple. I'm like, if the two of you make each other better, that's when it works. And I see the same thing in an employee-employer relationship. Do you make each other better? And I think I see that it's interesting. I'd be curious, Brenda, when you go into companies, it's for me, it's almost immediate when you walk in the front door. I could tell you within 2 or 3 minutes if the culture was decent or not. And you're, this, it seems like most places like, hey, I'm going to fill this role. And I think some people get in that mindset because that's all that they've ever done or all they've ever been allowed to do. And, when we talk to people, it's like, what do you want to do? And initially they're like, well, I want your job. I'm like, I don't know if you really want it, but hey, you can maybe have it at some point. But some people then, you get them on that leadership track, but you're right. There's other times where like, hey, you're doing this. I think you'd be phenomenal being the face and out doing business development and meeting folks. And we have several members of the team that I'm sure are doing things they never thought they would do. And I look at our youngest daughter, and she works in the construction industry, writing proposals, not an industry she ever thought she'd be in. The company she's working with has a good culture, and they treat her well, they respect her. And her thing when she came back from the first interview was, Dad, they talked to me like an adult. And I'm just like, they treated me like an adult. And, I'm just like, it's not, I wouldn't even want to minimize it by saying it's the simple little things, but it's being seen.
I agree with that 100%. Certainly the work that I do is not work that I ever saw myself doing. Again, I went to school. I got a degree in engineering. I'm certified in project management. Like, it didn't make sense. What do you mean help people with their careers? That didn't make sense to me. But you absolutely nailed it when you asked the critical question, what do you want to do? That is the question that so many professionals forget to address within themselves. And unfortunately, I see folks wrestling with that question after the trauma of a layoff, and that is not the time. That is not the time. I went through a thought exercise about 2 years ago, and I thought to myself, if I couldn't do the work that I love doing today, what else would I do? What else am I qualified to do? And that was difficult. I was in a very good mental health space. Like all the ducks were aligned, like everything, all the stars, everything was just perfect and glorious. And yet it was difficult. How much more difficult do you think it is for somebody who is struggling with depression and loss of identity and all those things as a result of a layoff? And so proactiveness it cannot be understated. It cannot be overstated. Proactive is the name of the game right now. As an employee, as the professional contributing to your organization, sometimes we can't be afraid to invest in ourselves. Sometimes our organization's budgets are so limited that they can't pay for our training, for our certification programs. Seek out other resources. If you're in Arizona, seek out I think the whole nation, WIOA grant funds. Those things are helpful to cover your costs for training and development, certification. Invest in yourself if you have the means. Pursue your own certification. I was told no when I asked for funding for my PMP. I work for a big company, and I was told, no, we don't have the funds for that. And so I went and paid it my darn self. And I got a thing that was mine. I don't care if you take this job away from me. That credential is mine. I earned it and I paid for it, and you can't take it. So things like investing in yourself, keeping your resume up to date. Look, I am a professional resume writer. I can't help but to talk about this. But so often, again, just like folks trying to come up with their whole career plan in the moment of hurt and pain, they're also trying to update their resumes at the worst possible time for themselves. This is not the best time. And so keeping your resume update, even if that just means I jot down a note here and there on some major thing that happened. You know, we had 90 people come to the Culture Crush outdoor hotness event in July. And we want to really kind of capture some of those highlights. We want to capture those things, but we don't always have time to sit and just like perfectly update our resume, but you don't need to. Your job is just to kind of keep a running tab of like, oh, I crushed it in that meeting. Oh, we finished that project on time. Oh, I closed that $100,000 sale. Oh, I did this big thing. Oh, I got that promotion after 6 months, right? Those things that you're probably going to forget about in a year at the worst time of your life because you just got notified that your job was going away. You're going to forget about all those good things you have already done. And so many people have to hire somebody like me to help extract it out of them when it really was there all along. They just forgot. And if you think about it, do you remember what you had for lunch on Friday? Of course you don't, right? And because we can't even think about what we had for lunch a week ago, how the heck is somebody going to remember their accomplishments from 5 years ago? And so those things are their job. Somebody once said that success is what happens when preparation and opportunity meet. And so preparation is the thing you control.
You know, I'm just trying to think about the team we have now, and there's a few, probably three or four of the hires we have were not when we had open positions. And my history's been, if somebody wants to work for you, they make a pretty amazing employee. And sometimes that may or may not fit into the budget, but just knowing, I was thinking about my transition when we started the bank in 2007. And the bank I had been at for 11 years, I was the president, had done it for 10 years as president. And he had me absolutely convinced that the only value I had was there. And he's like, well, because I was living here already. And he's like, oh, you won't make it in Arizona because your contacts are here. And I was absolutely, positively, totally convinced that I wouldn't have value if I went anywhere else. Knowing what I know now, and not until I was gone for a while did I realize how toxic that was. But it just, I'm like, I have a good job, make good money. Okay, life's good. And then I'm like, and then you start dreaming a little and you're like, I just remember the dreams my wife and I talked about. And I'm like, we've surpassed so many of them now. And things we literally didn't even dare dream. And, if people see a good culture, they talk to you and they're like, oh my goodness, I can probably do better. And then move on. And sometimes that break ends up being the best thing that ever happened in your life.
I swear to you here and now, that layoff was the best thing that ever happened in my life. It was a catalyst. It was the thing that had me start to dream again, as opposed to being just simply content with the work and the title and and the income. I was content. And so I didn't have cause to dream. I didn't have a reason to dream. I had all the things. They gave me just enough to be just happy enough to stay.
Or content enough.
Content enough. And so one of the things that I now teach is to understand that sometimes when the only people that we know are within the four walls or the confines of the building that we work within, that's not good enough, because what happens if that whole building shuts down? Now who you going to call, right? And so your network has to be active. You have got to participate in your own career. And so you have to show up. LinkedIn is just a beautiful resource that helps us to facilitate that quite easily, right? We can stay connected with folks. I just sent you a connection earlier today. I've been connected with Kendra. That's how I reached out to her initially, right? Karen, I'm just like, hey, how you doing? Okay. And just little pings allow me to reach back and say, hey, I see what you've got going on over there. I want to plug in. How can we make that happen? And one conversation leads to two, and it leads to being on a podcast, right? And so we have got to recognize that networking is our responsibility, not your employees, not your employers, not your friends or cousins or aunties. It's you. You have got to show up for yourself. LinkedIn conversations, show up to some of those social events, show up to some of the things that you're invited to. You don't have to go to everything. Of course you don't. But show up on occasion, because networking is within your control. And there are so many things, even the folks you meet on an airplane. The folks you meet on an airplane are, I met somebody at the Janet Jackson concert in 2019, and we're still connected to this day. And he just met Janet Jackson the other day, and I was like, yay! But this is what I'm saying. We can be better, because sometimes you don't know who I know. You have no idea who I know. I might know just the right person to connect you with. And now you are thriving in spaces that somebody, some toxic body told you would never make it.
The other thing, I know I will chime in no more after this, I promise.
As long as you want. For
but
11 more minutes.
For 11 more minutes. Them to be quiet after that. It's when folks are interviewing and you're talking to them, I prefer they ask more questions than I ask. Like I'm getting interviewed. And so that usually ends up being a strong plus, is something that's good to bring to an interview. But it's when people have been laid off, I feel like a counselor when I'm one of the companies they're interviewing with. They're afterwards, because it'll usually somewhere in the conversation will be like, I'm sure I'm not the right fit. You probably don't want to hire me. I mean, like literally those exact words will come out of their mouth, and I can't tell how many people. There's some people I'm just like, okay, good, you can move on now. But there's other people where you're just like looking at them and you can just see they're crushed. And you're like, and I've probably 4 or 5 times that I can think of off the top of my head, I'm like, okay, stop, take a breath. I said, you are important. Whether we hire you or not, you have to go at this with a positive attitude. Not that you come in cocky, it's just that you come in confident. It's like, I am a good person. I am good at what I do. And I said, I can feel that in an interview. And I said, if it's sometimes when it's all negative, you're like, okay, there's a victim mentality here and I'm not going to overcome that. But other times you're just like, this person's been so beat up and they need to be lifted up a little bit. I'm probably one of the few folks that's had hugs in some of those initial interviews. And you're just like, people, I mean, I've had people cry in interviews. I'm just like, I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that.
Can I tell you, I love that people like you exist.
I believe this.
I love that people like you exist. There is not enough interview coaching in all the land to help somebody who just is defeated. Now, you've said the magic word. You said the magic word, crush. And so, of course, I have to say, right, this book is a great resource, Crush the Pink Slip, Get Back to Work in 60 Days. I wrote this in 2015. So yes, my name's still Brenda Cunningham on it. Sorry. But it really is that kind of that very practical day-to-day action-oriented, very digestible pieces of information guide to help somebody get back to work. But confidence is something that sometimes, unfortunately, ask me how I know, takes some time to rebuild. And so I'm so grateful for people like you in the world that can see the skill, the character, the potential through the nerves and say, hold on, let's just reset. And let's just start that again, because I see you. There's nothing to fear here. But so more often, job seekers are faced with, the dirty looks because they perceive their age, their ethnicity, you name it, right? Their weight. I mean, all sorts of discrimination factors exist. And so to make the world a better place, as we all claim we want to make it, the best thing we can do is be human. The best thing we can do is be kind, be understanding, try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, because none of these people asked to be there. They didn't quit their jobs. They were invited to leave because of economic circumstances or forces. And so our job now is to help them find their way back, realize their awesomeness, but prepare, because they still do need to prepare for those conversations. They still do need to show up and be able to ask those questions. But I swear to you, they are scared. They are scared. I don't want to ask a question that's going to cost me this opportunity because I need a job. I need one. I don't just want one. I need one. I am a month away from not being able to pay my rent or my mortgage. And that is the scariest place, especially somebody who might be in their later 50s, 60s, and now they're facing discrimination, but they've got kids in college. They've got all this stuff going on, and we've got to do better.
There's a couple of things. I just love when I get to sit in the middle. Like, I write notes and doodles of like, oh, maybe I'll say this, I'll chime in, and then I just sit back. James, I'm not surprised that you've had people hug and cry in your interviews. As Brenda's sitting here saying, like, we have to do better. We have to be human. We have to be empathetic. I'm like, we have to be James.
Like, my wife would maybe not agree with that.
So. Hashtag we have to be James.
We have to be James. Maybe not 100%, but the way that you are showing up for people, and like Brenda said, like, that's not something that you can train leaders. So again, I'm not surprised you've had hugs and tears in your office.
Bravo.
Because Brenda, like you said, we're getting these people in distress mode, panic mode, stress mode. Their mental health is in the garbage. They're stressing. They're trying to find this next piece. They're trying to figure out who they are, what direction, and these moments are pivotal too, because they're going to maybe take whatever it is, and that might not be the best seat, the best position, the best company, but you're in stress mode to take what you can get. I don't want to say I love that happened to you with getting laid off and going in this direction, but I do love that it happened to you, because listening to you talk today, yeah, you went to school, you're an engineer, but I'm like, damn, girl, you are in the space that people need you in. And I will say, as somebody who was laid off and went, oh shit, like, they laid off all the executives, including myself. And then I I twisted that and took that moment as, okay, well, I've already started Culture Crush. Let's push through. Let's do it. Let's grow it. And maybe not everyone is in that position where they already kind of have something in the works, some meaty thing that they could grow, and they end up in panic mode, right? So you are so in the right space of where you're supposed to be. I just love that I got to sit back and just kind of listen to the both of you and talk about, yes, employers, let's be better, and also individuals, focus on you. The last thing I'll say that kind of came to mind as you were saying that, of focus on you and do your thing. I've done a lot of work on myself over the last year and a half. Let's be honest, like the last 6 months, full force, Kindred 2.0.
Nice.
And one of the things that I had to really get through was being called selfish, because it had a negative connotation to it. Right? And I was like, no, I'm not selfish. Like, I care about everybody. I want to help everyone. Like, that's literally what my business is, to help everybody else thrive. Like, how can I be called selfish? Now, fast forward, I'm like, oh, damn straight I am. Because if no one's going to take care of me, I can't depend on my employers. I can't depend on, like you said, the people in that building. I have to be selfish. Yes, I'm taking care of everyone and helping everyone. And I gotta be a little selfish in that. So I think that's kind of what part of our theme was today, is employers do better. And also we have to, as individuals, be able to focus on our own selves, our own growth, looking for those resources, those tools, those people like Brenda, those leaders and examples like James, all at the same time.
Amen.
Whoa. As we wrap in like 45 seconds. No, we have a moment. James, do you have any final question or anything that you want to note or ask or anything?
2 things real quick. So first is, when, some people that are in management that shouldn't be, it's they are what they've been taught. And it's just like an abuser might also be an abuser, and it goes on like that. And where I've found with some other CEOs I've worked with is you have to show them the practical side of why it makes sense to be decent, and which can be, you can get down to the dollars and cents piece of it and say, okay, it's turnover. What does that cost you in a year? Okay, that goes away. Eventually, though, that either, it has to be genuine and authentic. It has to be who you are. And some of the leaders do actually have that transformation on their own as well. The other thing I'll say is, when, you said, I hope you don't have to meet me. I hope everybody gets to meet you.
Aww. Yes.
And I think, and when they're making themselves better meeting you at an event, I mean, to meet somebody that's going to fill their cup and lift them up and show them what's possible is pretty amazing. So thanks for what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I think if anybody that's looking for the ROI of decency, like, look no further than your own reputation. Look no further than your Glassdoor reviews. Your employees are speaking, and people are listening. And when it's time for you to want to scale and grow and attract that next series of top talent, you're going to struggle. And so don't forget, we have opportunities. There is a benefit to just being decent. And I love that you don't have to look to the mathematical formulas. You were just born with it. Well done.
It's like Maybelline. Brenda, as we wrap up, is there any last little thing that you want to mention? Say, you have another book sitting next to you. I'm just throwing it out there. What else do you want to give us?
So this book is, I wrote a chapter in this kind of anthology book on purpose, practical strategies to live your best life. And it's called Fireproof. And it's how to really manage your career in such a way that no one ever dares try to let you go. And so this is the proactive counter to you have been let go, and Crush the Pink Slip is the guide to get back to work. But all of those things, and anybody that's facing a layoff or a looming layoff, you think one is coming, you're planning for it, you're meeting with your HR teams, please involve an outplacement advisor into your decision making and your planning process so that it can be as smooth a journey as possible for the people that will be affected.
And when they are looking to reach out to you, how do they find you?
They can visit pushcareermanagement.com. There is an outplacement tab, and you can schedule a complimentary exploratory call.
I love it. The last thing that we'll do before I close out is thank James again for being here. When this whole partnership, sponsorship, all of it started, I didn't envision any of it. And to this caliber of how much fun we have, we're going to have to take a screenshot of like our shoes above the table, like just the fun that we get to have. So I am extremely thankful for you and for Gateway, but for you.
Well, it's just a good culture match.
Yeah.
And you fill my cup, and I will spend my time with people like you.
I love it. Thank you. So we're going to do a quick clip from Gateway so you can hear a little bit more before we leave.
Remember when your banker knew you and cared about you? This experience still exists at Gateway Bank, the only community bank in Mesa, Arizona, serving customers Valley and nationwide. With Gateway, you get the fast personal service of a small bank with the convenience, security, and stability of a large one. Whether you need a loan or banking services for your business, they're here for you. Visit gcbaz.com/Culture Crush for details and a free consultation with Gateway President James Christensen.
Business podcast. On this podcast, we do these deep dive conversations with leaders that are in the space of growing a great company culture and resource partners that are in the space of helping to improve company culture. At the root, that is what the company does. We are a hub of company culture resources. So we are that master connector when it comes to resources focused on company culture. If it has to do with layoffs and preparing for layoffs, employee engagement, wellness, mental health, all of these areas that influence and affect company culture, we are that hub, including connecting with folks like Brenda that we had on today. So thank you again for listening, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Culture Crush Business Podcast. Culture Crush is your hub for company culture resources. If you think your company has a strong culture that should be highlighted, we want to hear from you. If you are a company that supports growing great cultures, then we want to hear from you too. Connect with us at info@culturecrushbusiness.com.